Hello. Hi. Hello. Cheryl Lampard here. I'm just coming in a few minutes early. I know we've got another minute or so to go, but I just wanted to make sure everything was working. If you could just let me know if you can hear me, if somebody could let me know if you can hear me, that would be wonderful. Ah, Mr. Gibbons, hello from Warwick, New Jersey. Thank you for joining us. I take it you can hear me. Excellent. Wonderful. So I'm just giving this a few moments. I wanted to make sure that you were seeing it on the screen, but wonderful to have you with Knitter Matters. And thank you all for the comments that you put in the threads last week. I really appreciated those. It's really helpful to me to know what you like to see. And also I realised, and again, thanks to your feedback, that some of my movements with the knitting were out of shot. To me, it looks like I'm in shot through the iPad, but of course I realised when I saw the replay that I wasn't. So thank you for letting me know that. I think I've resolved that this week, and I'm going to tell you how I've done that when we start. Okay, well, it looks like it's 7 o'clock, so I will start. Well, welcome indeed to Knitter Matters, Season 2, Episode 2. And whether you're a regular viewer or you're new to Knitter Matters, welcome if you are. Whether you're watching live or the replay later, I'm very grateful to you for taking the time out to join me. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm Cheryl Lampard. I'm an image consultant with Style Matters International. And one of the great joys I've had through my life, or two great passions I've had through my life, I should say, is the sewing and knitting. And knitting in particular is the thing that I find very relaxing and therapeutic. And I know from all the knitting forums that you do too. I used to be the owner of a yarn shop in Brighton, England. And one of the great joys of owning a yarn store is that you get to, apart from being surrounded by all that wonderful yarn, is that you get to teach people how to knit. And it's a great joy to be doing that all these years later, albeit via a different platform. So that said, I'm on my own again this week, meaning that I have no one operating the camera as I normally do. So bear with me when I move the camera if there's any wobbly or out of focus shots. I'll try and keep them to a minimum, but I do have to adjust the position. Now I do have a laptop on to my left so that I can see what you're seeing. But there's several seconds delay before what I see through the iPad comes onto the screen, the live feed. And last week I realised afterwards, and also you had given me some feedback, which I'm grateful for, that I was a little outside of the viewing screen. So some of the knitting that you wanted to see was a little out of shot. So I'm sorry about that. This week I've marked out the area of my desktop with red marking tape. Dressmaker's marking tape, of course, and I've marked out the area that I need to work. It looks a bit strange, but hopefully that will resolve the issue. I'll also try and say hello when your names pop up. I'd really like to do that when I see you pop up. Forgive me if I miss your names when it comes up. I can only see a certain amount while I'm doing the live, but I do welcome your feedback and your comments, and do ask any questions in the thread below, either as we go along or through the week, and I'll respond and reply as soon as possible afterwards. And let me know also what you would like me to do for future Knitter Matters episodes. Knitter Matters is all about helping people with their knitting, so if there's any particular subject or topic that you want help with, let me know and I'll schedule it for a future episode. Right, I am going to move the camera now, so this is the moment to look away if it makes you a bit dizzy. It will take me a moment to do this, but I'll try and be as quick as possible. But there's going to be a bit of wobbliness and shakiness. Okay, so you can see my red lines there, I think. And I just need to get those positioned to where you're going to be able to see my hand. Sorry, I'm moving the chair as well. So let me just try not to get my thumb over that. This worked perfectly when I played about with it. But what's happening now? Okay, I need to move that. Okay, I think, let me see what you can see, because that's actually what matters. I'm going to have to move the laptop a bit out of the way. Okay. I'm seeing red lines. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see that. Okay, I'll get there in a minute. Just bear with me. Just talk amongst yourselves for a minute. Okay, right. I can see you, or I can see through the screen. Oh, let's get this in position. No, okay. This isn't looking good. What's happening? Sorry, everyone. I don't know what's going on here. Okay. Now, this should be okay. Once I get this set up, I promise not to move it again. It's just tricky. Okay. One more little tweak, I think. Oh. Okay. As long as you can see what I'm doing, that's all I'm concerned about. Okay. I think we're good. See, I have to remember what you see isn't quite what I'm seeing through the iPad, but you can see this, so that's okay. Right, so this episode is all, I'm sorry that took so long. Next time, well, I'll either have my camera person back or I'll have an overhead camera, one of the two, and that'll make life a lot easier all round. Anyway, this episode is all about slip stitch patterns. Now, you've probably all come across slip stitch either at the start of a row to keep the edges neat or in an instruction. This is an example here of where you can use a slip stitch along the edge of the knitting. And you kind of create a sort of chain stitch there. What I did here was I slipped one stitch at the start of every row. I finished the row off with a knit stitch, but you end up with this kind of chain stitch here, which if you're doing a scarf or an item that it's it's not going to be stitched anywhere, then that's not a bad thing to do. It's quite a neat edge, and it gives you some kind of design element there too. Or you might have seen it in an instruction like slip one, knit one, pass slip stitch over, or slip, slip, knit. They're all slip stitches. But in episode 35, we did a button band. A button band? Yes, that's right. A button band in double knitting. And that is actually a slip stitch technique because you're slipping stitches on every row. In this button band, what we've done to this part here and this part here with the buttonholes, what we did was you need to knit 2 rows before you get 1 row because you're slipping every other stitch. So you have a double thickness of yarn. And indeed, in episode 38, when we did basic brioche, that's a slip stitch technique too. A different one, but it's still a slip stitch technique. And although these techniques on their own have names, as I said, the double knitting or brioche, they also fall into the family of slip stitch patterns. And one of the characteristics of slip stitch knitting is that it creates a denser, thicker fabric. And this is because the slipped stitches, that's hard to keep saying, the slipped stitches tend to pull up the work. They tend to make it thicker in parts. So usually more rows are required than in plain knitting to get to a given length. So you could describe it almost as a vertical density, if you will. Both these are pull up the knitting vertically. I'm going to show you how to do these in a moment. So this is, of course, true of double knitting in brioche, but some techniques create a horizontal density where more stitches are required for a given width, and sometimes it's both. That's not necessarily a big deal, but you do need to consider the fabric density if you're substituting a design with a slip stitch pattern, because you're going to use more yarn. You're going to have to knit more to get the length that you want. You're going to have to use more yarn. See, I'm glad. Oh, I put my marks down, but still, I've really got to make sure you can see when I'm knitting. Anyway, I promise to make sure that you'll see the knitting in my little squared off bit here. But you can do some wonderful things with the slip stitch pattern. You can use it for ribbing, which is a really nice ridged ribbing. You can use it to embellish what otherwise might be a fairly simple plain stockinette stitch with something like this, where you've got these really interesting ridges going up. That's a very simple thing to do. It's not going to affect the your gauge very much either. It just might affect how many rows you had to a given length, as I said. But again, you would always do a test piece before you start. You can create some really interesting effects with colour work too, as in this one, which I hope you can see. Very simple but very effective little pattern here. Just worked with 3 rows of a contrast colour. That would be really pretty on a, you know, as a stripe on a garment or for a child's pattern. Again, it's a slip stitch technique, very simple. And this one, which I think is really quite spectacular and is surprisingly easy to do, and I shall show you that in a short while. This sort of checkerboard, ridged checkerboard effect, really very interesting. So all of these can be done with slip stitches. Now, before I demo any of these, let me just adjust something because the light ring is okay. I was pressing it on the button for the light switch. So one of the things that you need to just watch out for in older patterns, directions in older patterns might just say something very simple like slip 1. Well, that's all very well, and it's fair to say that unless it states otherwise, most patterns, most slip stitches are done purlwise. So you would slip it purlwise unless the pattern says otherwise. But that's too simplistic. It doesn't actually indicate where the yarn needs to be, and you need to know that for most of these patterns. So much more helpfully is where you see WYIB or WYIF, which means with yarn in front, as there, or with yarn in back. So the WY is the same with yarn in back, in front. That's the difference. Now, that doesn't necessarily relate to right or wrong side rows. Sometimes you do with yarn in back when you're actually doing a purl row, where normally you'd have the yarn in the front, and vice versa. Sometimes you have the yarn in front when you're doing a knit row. So you need to know where the yarn is going to be. So, but just remember that yarn in front doesn't necessarily mean that's a right side row. What it means is that it's the side that's facing you. So whether it's a purl row or a knit row, when it's yarn in front, it's the side of the knitting that's facing you. And when it's yarn in back, it means the side that's furthest away from you. So it's the side that's away from you, whether that is a knit or a purl. Okay, so let me show you a few examples. Let's get going. Let's make sure I've got the right size needle, because I've got 2 different size needles going on here. Right, I'm going to have to just do something a bit weird here to make sure you can see. So I'm going to show you this really interesting rib technique now. You could easily replace this would be great on the neckband of a sweater or the cuffs or the hemline. It's a little bit different to an ordinary rib. It's very simple to do. It creates a lovely springy texture, but you might want to think about doing it one time. I'm just going to do my stitch. I just put some extra stitches at the edge just so I'd have some sort of edge going on. Okay, I'm just keeping an eye on that you can see my hands. Okay, so what we're doing here, this pattern is a multiple of 5 stitches plus 2. So what that means is that you, let's say across a sweater, it's a multiple of 5. So however many stitches that would be, it's got to divide into 5 plus 2 stitches. So a multiple of 5 for the pattern plus 2. So here we go. This is the, I've already done a wrong side. So this is a right side. This is actually a right side. I'm sitting at a very awkward angle. Just a minute. Let me try and move my chair a little without. Right. Okay. Let's see. I'm trying not to joggle the light ring. Now all we do here, we knit one. We slip one with the yarn in back. Okay. Now that's pretty standard because if you were knitting anyway, your yarn will be in the back. But I'm slipping it purlwise, my yarn is at the back, and I knit one. Now I'm going to purl 2, and I continue that across the row. Knit 1, slip 1 with yarn in back, knit 1. And when we turn it round, you can really see what's happening with those slipped stitches. Knit 1, slip 1 with the yarn in back, knit 1 again, purl, 2 pearls there, knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, purl 2. I just put 2 extra edge stitches on. You don't have to do that. Do what your pattern would tell you, but that's what I did. Right, now on the purl side, oh sorry, not the camera. Can you see how those slip stitches, this is what you get on the wrong side. You can see that is pulling that in. It's kind of pulling that in nice and springy. So that's why you get such a nice springy texture. Can't speak today. So on the wrong side row, what we're going to be doing here is knitting 2 and purling 3. That's why this is a repeat of 5 stitches, but plus 2 end ones so that it's your start and end stitches. So what we're doing is purling 3, knitting 2. Simple, simple, simple. Oh, my tape is unraveling itself. Would you believe it? My yarn has got stuck to my very carefully placed red tape. Oh, that's horrible. Hang on, let me fix that. Oh my goodness. Took me ages to get that in the right place, and now my yarn has knocked it all over. Oh well. Oh well. Knit 2, purl 3. Worst things happen. Let's see, they say. Right. Okay. So that's all there is to a very, very simple little pattern there. And look how effective that is. You can see that nice elongated stitch, if you will, there. If you were to count up the amount of knit rows that you've done, you'd get the correct number if you counted the edges there, the edges of the kind of the knitted rib. But if you go up the central spine, if you will, it's 2 of these to a row. But it's a very effective little rib technique. I like it very much. And you could easily put that for a cuff or a hat band, collar of a sweater, something like that. Very simple slip stitch pattern. Gosh, that's hard to say. Right, let's have a look at another one. I think I have to change my needle there. I think there's a bigger needle on that one. Yes, it is. Okay, so this one is called slipped stitch ridges. Try saying that several times after a glass of wine or 3. This one is a multiple of 6 stitches plus 5. And I will say I got this design and the first one, the ridged rib, from Barbara Walker, the brilliant Barbara G. Walker's Treasury of Knitting Patterns. Such a useful book. We've featured that before, but wonderful sort of stitch directory. But look at these really nice elongated stitches. If you were just doing stockinette stitch, it can get a bit tedious and boring, but this you could actually really make something of just by doing this pattern, and it's so simple. This is a 4-row pattern, but let's start off. So this, we're starting on the right side here. For this one, we're going to knit 5. I'm actually knitting 6 because I had an edge stitch. We're going to slip 1 with the yarn in back, exactly as we did before. And then I'm going to knit another 5 stitches. Another 5 stitches. Sorry, I slipped that one. And another 5 stitches. Going to slip it. I'm slipping it purlwise again. My yarn is at the back. And my yarn has got caught on my red tape again. Oh well. Look at that. My carefully placed red tape is like a piece of red spaghetti now. Oh well. I can see you well enough in the laptop screen, so I'll follow that. Slip 1 purlwise with the yarn at the back. Knit, 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 knit. Right, we're on the wrong side row now. We're going to purl 5. This will actually be 6 because I had an edge stitch there, which I didn't worry about there. So on this occasion, we do a WYIF, which means with yarn in front. So we haven't got to move the yarn about here. It's a slip 1. Again, I slip it purlwise, and we're going to purl 5. So what you're doing when you do the slip stitch like that, you're kind of it's just pulling in that bit of the fabric. So in that sense, oh, I'm talking and I should have slipped that one. That happens too. So I purl 5. I've got to slip that one with my yarn in front, purl another 5. Try to see if I can count and talk. Okay. So what you're doing, it just tightens up the fabric just a tad. This one, you know, if you did a test swatch on this, if you wanted to substitute just ordinary stockinette stitch and do this instead, I would do a test swatch to see how much it pulls it in, because it is pulling it in a little bit, and that's not going to matter on something like a scarf or something that where gauge isn't critical. But if this was on a sweater, you might find that could be the difference between it fitting the way you want it to and not so. Now we do the same thing as we did on row 1 for row 3 on this pattern. So we're slipping that stitch, and you might be thinking, well, how does it just extend itself like that? Well, it does, but that's the whole point about the fact that it's pulling in the knitting. Oh, I can see I've moved off the spot that you need to see. All my clever markings. Oh well. I'll make sure that you can see exactly what I've done. Slip again and get to the end of the row. And you've seen this row anyway, because it's exactly the same as row 1. Now, if you will, the magic sort of happens a bit on the row 4, where you purl all the stitches. And what that does, that kind of locks that elongated stitch in. So this is the row that you purl all the stitches. You can talk on this one and drink wine and not worry about counting, or drink tea and not worry about counting, whatever is your preference. But when you're purling these stitches, and I'm a bit cack-handed here because, see, this would normally be the one that you're slipping. We're going to purl that. Oh, look at this. My red line is getting caught up with my yarn. Who knew? Gosh, it took me ages to sort that out, and now it's all Gone, as my husband would say, gone to custard. Okay, pearl. This is the bit that's, well, all these rows are important, but this is the one that locks those elongated stitches in. If only it would have locked my red marking tape in, which it hasn't. Look, that's come adrift as well now. Oh well. Now it's sticking to me. Okay. So you see that this 4-row pattern, this is the one, it just locks that in. It's not going anywhere now. Would I necessarily use this on a pattern for a child? Maybe. Well, you could. I'm just thinking you don't want to get that caught on things, and kiddies tend to manage to get things caught up. But it's very nice. It's very effective. You could certainly do it on a scarf. You could do it on a sweater. But the technique is so simple and it's very effective. So that's our slipped stitch ridges. Oh, I can see a few people have popped up. Let me say hello to a few people. There's Anne from Wisconsin. Hi there. Thank you for joining us. Let me show you this one now. This one we are going to be doing different things with the yarn placement. So let me get the right needle because I've gone back to a slightly smaller size. So this is a 3-row slip stitch colour pattern. 3-row slip stitch colour pattern. Okay. So I'm ready to use my second colour. I'm on the right side. That's my edge stitch. I'm just going to, so it's knit 1. Now this is where we do need to bring our yarn forward, because although this is a yarn in front, with yarn in front, we're going to slip that one. Then we take that to the back to knit. Just give myself a bit more yarn here. And that's all we do for the whole of that row. So I bring my yarn forward because it's with yarn in front. I slip it. I'm wrapping the stitch, if you will. And you'll have wrapped the stitch if you've done short rows, and you'll have certainly, if you did watch me do the double knitting and the buttonhole band, you'll know what we were doing there. We're wrapping that stitch. In essence, we're wrapping it. We're not actually wrapping it and turning like you would on a short row, but you can see that lilac has wrapped that slipped stitch. So knitting, yarn forward with yarn in front, we're slipping the stitch, and we're knitting. So the yarn forward, slip, goes back, knitting. Yarn forward, slip, goes back, knitting. Yarn forward, slip, turn it to normal knitting place, forward, back, knit, forward, back, knit, forward, back, knit, slip. Okay. I should have done a smaller sample, then you wouldn't have to watch me doing the whole thing. And then we knit one at the end of that row. Okay, the second row is easy. We just purl along it. But I'm going to do the whole thing because I want you to see how simple this is and how effective it is. I've spread out my stripes. You could easily make them narrow. You could do completely different colours for each one. But it's very effective, and it would be very pretty on a child's cardigan, or just to, instead of ordinary stripes. It sort of breaks it up a bit, but it's very pretty. And you could do some really interesting colour combinations. You could do a charcoal grey and a lime green or a hot pink. It'd be lovely. So we've done the pearl row now. So you can see already how that's coming out. Now we go back to our main colour for the third row of this. I'll just knit one. This time again, yarn in front, slip one, yarn in front. So what we're doing now is we're slipping the purple, well, it's all purple, but we're wrapping that purple stitch we're knitting. We're doing exactly the same as we did in the previous right side row, but with the other colour. That's all we're doing. Gosh, I'm glad you can't see my face at the moment. I'm sure it's beetroot red. I'm sitting right next to this light ring, and although it's LED lights, maybe it's just because I'm sitting next to a light, it makes me feel hot. There's no real heat coming off it, has to be said. What am I doing? Yes. So, exactly the same as I just did. And then we would purl with the main colour. See how simple that is and very effective. You could use that. You could use that on a pocket. You could use that on the edge of something. Very pretty, very simple. And that's what it looks like on the back. So you can see this one doesn't pull it in too much actually, because you're doing every other stitch. You're doing one and one and one. So you're not really going to get much change in the gauge. It's not pulling it in the way that some of the other designs are. Let me show you the last one, because I think this is so effective. And this is deceptively easy. I've got 2 different size needles here, so I'm going to grab, that's a 4.5. Yep. I'm going to start off with I need to get that needle too. That'll work. Sorry, I'm just fishing about for another needle, because I don't want to be clunking about with 2 long ones. Okay, that's it. There it is. Okay. So this is the ridge check pattern. Now this is a multiple of 4 stitches plus 3, and you're using 2 colours. Now I've done several rows so you can see how this pattern forms. I'm just going to do, we're going on to the teal now. So this is my contrast, this is my colour B, I would say, on this. So what I'm going to do here, this is so simple. It's very much like the plain one that we did with the ridges a minute ago. So what I'm going to do here, I knit 3 plus my edge stitch. I slip that with the yarn at the back, knit 3. Super simple. And it's very effective. I think this looks much more complicated than it actually is. You're just dealing with 8 rows on this one, because you're doing 4 rows of one colour and 4 rows of another. But I'm not going to do all 8 rows, because it's just a repetition of the first 4 essentially. Okay, so what you've done there, you've knitted 3, you've slipped it with the yarn at the back, knitted 3, slipped it. On my next row, oh, I don't want that long needle, that's the one I want. What I'm going to do here, this is very simple. Gosh, I didn't, yeah, you can see me. Purl 3. The yarn is at the front, it's already at the front, and that's where I keep it. I slip that stitch, I purl 3. Very simple. Oh, it's not if you purl it by mistake. I slip that one, I purl my 3. And what you're doing is you're slipping the contrast colour, so if you're paying attention, which I wasn't then, it's easy to know which one you're slipping. It's the contrast one. In fact, in some ways, this is actually easier than the plain version, because it's always the contrast stitch that you're slipping. I'll do one more row. Oh, I might do 2 rows on that actually. So again, what we're doing, yarn is at back, we're slipping the stitch. Knit 3. Slip the stitch, knit, 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 slip the stitch, knit, knit, knit. And you think, well, how can that stitch pull up from 3 rows? But it does. Now again, this is where, if you will, the magic happens. Row 4, this is where you're locking in those slipped stitches, because what you're doing here is purling. You're purling all the stitches now. So it's exactly the same as the solid colour ridged pattern that we did in our second sample. And all my yarn is getting tangled here, but I can manage to get to the end of the row so that you can see. Here we go. There we go. I love this one. I think this is so cool. And then you would just repeat exactly the last 4 rows, but with the other colour. Imagine how effective that would be in black and white, or really high contrast. I think that's fabulous. Again, very simple, breaks up stripes, really makes it a very clever design. And it's basically the same as the solid colour one, but just with 2 colours. Okay. So I'm going to move the camera again. Just bear with me because it's going to wobble a bit. So look away if that sort of thing makes you feel uneasy. And I hopefully will be able to scoot backwards. Hopefully you can see me okay. A bit wibbly wobbly, I know. Okay, don't forget our friends at Mary Maxim are offering a 20% discount off of 1 item. I'm hoping you can see that okay. Just take a minute to get that into focus. Sorry. Sorry, it's the delay, but I'm hoping you can see that. Okay, our friends at Mary Maxim offering 20% discount off 1 item as long as you use the promo code Cheryl. I can see that's out of shot, but I'll lift it up a bit. So it's the promo code Cheryl at checkout. You must use that to get the 20% off. And it's www.marymaxim.com, and the promo code is Cheryl. As always, this episode and all others are uploaded afterwards to our page and to our YouTube channel of the same name, Knit Matters. If you're searching for this one, don't forget it's season 2 now, so this is season 2, episode 2. Thank you again for watching. I really appreciate it. Feel free to put any questions, comments in the thread below, and let me know, again, I'm going to say it again, let me know what you want me to teach you. It's my pleasure to do it. Let me know what you'd like to learn, or what you'd like, any topic or technique you'd like me to cover, and we'll schedule it for a future episode. Until next week, 7 p.m. Eastern, same time next week for Knit Matters. Keep safe, keep calm, and most importantly of all, keep knitting. Stay well, stay safe. Bye for now. Thank you for joining me. And I have to just get up and turn this off now.